I'm just going to end the build up. Just going to go live. Nobody watching. I've been replaying the 30-second intro about 4 or 5 times. Nobody's come in yet. Never mind. I'll just chat shit for a bit until somebody comes on. I'm sure DJ will come on eventually. Maybe Apollo. Yeah, but it's difficult sitting. It's difficult when there's nobody there. You can't just talking and there's no one to interact with. It's difficult. So, what am I going to talk about? That's tricky. I don't know what to do. What shall I do? Go to the comments. Yeah, there's nobody there. Yeah, I wish I knew how to. I'm so clueless about technology and like how to do shit. If I could just have like a opening like 10-minute or 5-minute, whatever, just countdown sequence before people come on. But I don't know how to do that. Everybody else does it, and I just don't know how to do it. So I need to look into that. I'm just too reliant on StreamYard to do like the 30-second intro, and then just go from there. But well, so yeah, what am I going to talk about while I'm waiting for people to come on board for this live commentary? Does it really matter if anyone's watching? Because then they can watch it back and get the whole thing. I guess what I would say is that in terms of a monster movie, I tweeted out before, it's directed by a convicted sex offender, which I suppose is a bit of a no-no. But most people, and myself included, when I first saw this film, I had no idea about Victor Salva's past. I didn't know, who he was. I didn't know anything about his history. So I just watched the film, lapped it up, loved it. And even when the sequel came around, I had no idea about Victor Salva. I didn't know who he was. Thought he was just like just any other man. Didn't really know about the ins and outs of Hollywood. He's probably not that unusual in Hollywood, to be honest with you. He's probably it's probably not even that strange in the circles they mix in. But yeah, no idea. So it was only probably about 2011, 2012 when I even became aware of what he'd been doing. And so by the time Part 3 came out, which is, I've not seen the film, it's meant to be complete shit. So it doesn't really bother me that I don't see it. And if I never see anything by him ever again, fair enough. They are meant to be doing a new trilogy based on the Creeper, which has nothing to do with Victor Salva. So I'm down for that. I don't mind. I like the whole story of Jeepers Creepers. Forget the fact that Victor Salva's involved. Okay, it's not great that you've got a convicted sex offender directing one of your favorite films, but I can look beyond that and say, well, there's a history to this before him, and there's more to it after him. So, yeah, I mean, what can I say? For all the faults of the director, he did direct a really, really, really solid. Well, more than solid. He directed a great creature feature in 2001. Hence the 20th anniversary live stream, because this film did come out in August 2001. I think it got its American release in August 31st, 2001. I'm not sure if UK was the same, but it's almost bang on for the 20th anniversary of this film, and it's a film that, for all its notoriety for the director, it shouldn't be forgotten because of who directed it. It should be remembered, in my opinion, for like what it was. It's just as a great film, and it came out at a time that was maybe the tail end of slasher films. Um, the slasher the rebirth, I should say, because you had, Scream kind of heralded in this new boom of slasher films in '96, and you got all that in the late '90s and very early noughties. But by the 2001, 2002, slasher films again becoming more like found footage, and the whole reboot, which it did involve slasher films, but in terms of like original slasher films, it was definitely on the wane. Yeah, because 2002, 2003, 2004, you start to see the whole found footage really really getting a foothold, and yeah, the reboots becoming a big thing. So 2001 was a strange time to be releasing a monster movie, because it didn't really fit in with the narrative of the time. You've as I say, late '90s was just slasher central, Scream rip-offs left, right, and centre. Urban Legend was dropping sequels, and then obviously Blair Witch came out in '99, and then you get into the early noughties and you start getting the found footage really starts getting a foothold. But like an old-fashioned monster movie, which is kind of what Jeepers Creepers is. It is kind of like an old-fashioned monster movie. I mean, what would you describe the creeper as? He is just a monster. It's and with the setting as well. You got that rural setting. It is very much like an old school monster setting, like a monster movie. Um, so I mean, it was maybe a brave move by Victor Salva at the time to put something like this to film. But I mean, like I've said a couple of times already, regardless of what his background is, this for me is one of the best horror films of the 2000s, and I'm just going to get on with watching it. Hopefully, people come on at some point, but I'm just going to press play. So if you're watching in the past, I am pressing play now. I actually think I've jumped slightly forward. I'm actually 1 minute. Sorry, 1 minute 10. 1 minute 10. And I never realised this film was set in Florida. It's filmed in Florida and set in Florida. I always assumed this was like somewhere like maybe like Texas or Alabama, somewhere like I never really thought of Florida as being a place where it was considered, quite, because they give the impression at the beginning of the film that this is like really sort of like, redneck country. But I never really regarded Florida as like, rednecks. I always thought Florida was like maybe it's not me. I'm only going by what the film describes. It's set in Florida and it's filmed in Florida. At the beginning of the film, they are kind of mocking where they are, saying basically, rednecks who are like Bible bashers, scared of God and that. So
on this road, I haven't seen a car in 50 miles.
But it's the perfect setup for this film. I mean, just that open road and the introduction to Creeper is just genius. I'm just going to put another link out. If I can.
That's 3 for Little Rose.
That's a 6, not a G, idiot. That's sexy forever. That's mine. That's 5 to 2. Hey, Fever.
I hate trying to share a link on Twitter. For some reason, it just does not.
Sexy forever, huh?
You know that is you in 4 years.
At this game they play, I just don't understand where they read the registration plate and they try and decipher who gets the points based on. That's just a mystery to me. Maybe that's an American thing. If someone can explain that to me, not now because nobody's watching, but maybe further down the line, because I just don't understand.
I will tell them the exact same thing I'll tell you. None of your goddamn business.
What? But you don't think I can understand the complex nature of your relationships?
No, I look at you as a real expert.
Well, I don't care. Just saying, it's a little bit off of me. You should at least figure out what you're going to tell mom and dad. They're the ones that love the guy.
This is arguably the best scene in the film, which is not taking away anything from the film, but the scene with the camper van with the old couple and they just turn off, and then you see it's a blur in the distance. Now, if you're watching this one for the first time, you probably wouldn't even be aware of it. And the first time I saw the film, it's only 20 seconds in that you see it approaching, and at that point you know that this is something to be feared. It becomes more and more obvious, but that's the genius of the scene. It's for anyone watching it for the first time, they've got no idea what's going on, and then obviously the horn hits, and it's such a good scene. This. It feels like Jaws almost. The scene. It's almost like they're like Jaws. The truck is Jaws, and they're trying to escape. It's really sort of like. I'm trying to think of a word to describe it. It feels very primal. Another thing I will say about they come across like a very realistic brother and sister. Obviously, they're only actors, but the way they play off each other, certainly in the first 10 minutes, it's very believable. It does feel like a real brother and sister relationship. This is just a bit more of an exposition, building up the characters. Giving us a bit more info on them. It's like a bit of an info dump. Just give us 5 to 10 minutes to really sort of get to know the characters. Give us something to care about, which is something that a lot of horror films don't do. Before building up to obviously the drive-by, seeing the creeper dumping the body down the shaft. because obviously, you know, the shit goes down pretty quickly in this film, and you have to give us, you have to give, a good 10-15 minutes of, like, really getting to know the characters, to almost like to explain why they do what they do and to care about them, because obviously, within the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes of the film, they know there's some, something's pretty fucked up. It's not like some horror films where, they spend like the first 50, 60 minutes of the film and they don't really know what's going on. Within the first 20 minutes, they know something's wrong. It quite handily as well, because this is 2001. This is still a time when mobile phones or cell phones were in the infancy. So when they're trying to call for help, he says, "Oh, my cell phone isn't charged up," and they need to use the cigarette charger to charge the phone up, and that doesn't work. And it's just like a nice throwback. Well, it's not a throwback because this film is 2001, but it's a nice reminder of just how things were back, even 20 years ago. Something you take for granted now is just picking up your phone and making an emergency call. 20 years ago, it wasn't that straightforward. As crazy as it sounds, if you were in the middle of nowhere and your cell phone was dead, you just couldn't make a call. And likely there wouldn't even be a signal anyway, so. This is the famous scene where they drive past and see the creeper just dumping the body. Love this scene, so good. Reminds me of The Undertaker. He sort of turns around and he sort of looks. It's just. The way he looks, so good. Sean, what's up, man? You're the first person to join the chat. I've been wondering, where is everyone? I'm not expecting a massive audience, but I thought, oh, DJ will turn up. And I thought maybe Apollo. I thought, oh, sure, maybe, but you're the first person, man. If you want a timestamp for the film, we are 11 minutes in. Sean, they've just driven past the creeper and he's just got on his van and he is stalking them. So, yeah. I did address that in the tweet. I did put a tweet out saying, yeah, if you like monster movies but you don't like sex offenders, then, well, just watch it anyway. But if you've got Amazon Prime, then it's free on Amazon Prime. It's certainly in the UK. I don't know if Ireland's the same, but yeah, it's free on Amazon Prime. I'm just watching it on Amazon Prime. But yeah, like I say, just hitting 12 minutes now. Whack it on then, mate. Get involved. No, I prefer one. Sean, I prefer one. I mean, if anything, Victor Salva's you know, how would you describe it? His preferences are even more obvious in part 2 for young boys. That's all I'll say. Lots of teenage boys sunbathing. Yeah, no, I think one's the better film, but that's just me. Just at the point where they're going to make the brilliant decision to go back to where they've just seen a dead body being dumped down a shaft. Possibly one of the worst decisions ever made in horror. Like, who would do that? I did like this. I like the fact that they did actually kill off one of the. There's very few deaths in this film, but in fact, the might only. Well, I think a couple of the police get killed, but the fact that they do actually, kill off. Spoiler alert! One of the main 2 characters was the right decision to make, and it ties in with, like, obviously why at the beginning of the film he was doing what he does, because obviously he's at the beginning of the film and he drive past, you're thinking, well, why is he doing what he's doing? Why is he just drove off? And obviously he's just trying to scare them, and he just wants to, that's how he discovers what he needs, and he scares the shit out of people, takes the sense in, and he thinks, oh yeah, I need your eyes, or I need your, you know what I mean? It's quite a clever way of doing things. Yeah. As I say, I remember this film when it came out. I remember this film getting rave reviews. I remember this film getting, like, really, really, really good reviews. A lot of people were saying it was this was going to be. It was 2001, so you couldn't come up and say, oh, it's the best film of the decade, because we were only like a year in. But a lot of the reviews were saying, oh, this is a fantastic horror film. I remember, like, reading the reviews, getting totally hyped for it, and I wasn't disappointed. I went to see this on the cinema, and I was blown away, because it was not something like I think at this point I was pretty worn out with the slasher genre, because since '96 with the Scream and the whole rebirth, the slasher genre, I think I was pretty much blown. I mean, Scream 2, Scream 3, I think. No, we did last summer. No, we did last summer. Urban Legend, Cherry Falls, probably a few others which I can't remember. So just something different, and it was just something. And as I say, it didn't really set a trend off after this. We kind of went straight into remakes and obviously more found footage, and monster movies never really took off, because it is a monster movie. The creeper is basically, he's like a monster. So it never really did take off, but yeah, I've got great memories of this film. You seen No, I've not seen Candyman yet. I've heard a lot of bad things about Candyman. I had very, very a lot of reservations before the film came out, and they've only been confirmed from what I've seen. I've seen quite a few YouTubers like bigging it up, but I've seen YouTubers who I expected to big it up, even they're saying it's not that great. From what I've read and what I've seen on YouTube, is it's not remotely scary. And not only is it remotely scary, it's what my favorite. Well, one of the things I was suspecting was it was going to be very heavy-handed politically with the whole race narrative. I think there's going to be a fair bit of like, you know, BLM stuff, and I thought I don't want that in a Candyman film. And I understand the original the original Candyman was political to a point, but it was still more about the horror, which is where it should be. You know, I don't mind political films, and I don't mind films that deal with, you know, political stuff regarding, you know, race or sexuality or whatever. But I don't want it in horror films. Just, you know, not in horror. Horror should just be left, you know, just left to itself. You know, we don't need that. We need horror should be escapism. We don't need to be just like banged over the head with, like, you know, stuff we see every day in the news when we watch the latest, you know, horror film. But yeah, from what I've read, it is quite heavy-handed. And like I say, if even mainstream YouTubers who have got a lot of subscribers, even if they're saying it, then there must be something in it, because a lot of these big YouTubers, they do tend to maybe take the corporate line a lot of the time, and the corporate line would say that this is a good film because that's just the way it goes. But if even big YouTubers say, no, I'm not going to go down that road, then I do think that, yeah, it's probably is confirmed that this film is not probably all it's probably going to turn out exactly the way I expected it to, which is it's probably going to be very woke and not remotely scary, and that seems to be what I'm hearing. So, and Tony Todd's barely in the film, as you say there, Sean. Yeah, apparently it's like in for like 5 seconds. Yeah, I didn't like it. And this is the scene where Justin Long, he's 20 minutes in now, and of course he falls through the what do you call it, a mine shaft or some sort of shaft, and obviously he wakes up, and this is where, you know, he realizes just what he's landed himself in. I love the shaft of light. The light just comes down on him, and there's just complete blackness all around. I'm not entirely sure how they ever managed, because the local people, they kind of know that something's not right with this town. Like, people go missing, but there's sheer number of people who go missing, and like they don't even like, nothing gets questioned really, because it's like there's hundreds of dead bodies down in this mine shaft. I'd love to see it as well, because you get the character who's recently been captured and he's still alive, and he's like, help me. Oh, that's a good scene. Which in the sequel, this place gets families and somebody really old. Which in the sequel? Which, what do you mean, Sean? Whereabouts in the sequel? I know what you mean about the, yeah, I mean, I know the police do find it, but it's been I'm trying to think the last time I saw the sequel. It's been a long time, probably a good 10 years. The only thing I remember the sequel is just a lot of time spent on a bus, and that's all I remember about the sequel. And the very beginning of the film, when the creeper's on it's like a scarecrow, and he kind of looks away. I think that's a really good scene. But apart from that, I don't remember much about that film at all. And like I have not seen part 3, but from what I've heard, part 3 is just absolutely atrocious. Oh, in the radio, and GP's on the radio. Okay. That does ring a bell, actually. Now you say that. This is where the the corpse in the bag grabs Justin Long's character. I'm not quite sure I was still alive at this point. I'm not sure whether it was ever how many victims he killed in the, because obviously it's every 23 years, I think, he comes and goes. But I can't remember how long is it that he's allowed to, kill for, so it's every 23 years. Is it like, I can't remember. Is it for 24 hours? Is it 48 hours? Or is it 3 days? I can't remember how long the creeper gets before he has to go and like hibernate again. Yeah, it's definitely, 23 days. Okay. So I knew it was 23 years that he came. I didn't know it was that long for 23 days. Yeah, I suppose it makes sense. 23 years, 23 days. That's quite a long time. I suppose that's what explains how he managed to kill so many people. Because he does take his time. It was just like, if it for 24 hours. I mean, he takes time in the film picking these two off, and obviously he only ends up, killing one of them. So yeah, I suppose it makes sense that he would have longer than, a day or two. Oh, Dan, what's up, man? 23 years, 23 for 23 days. Yeah, it's all about numbers. Nice to see you in the chat, man. The link, if you want to jump on, man, the link's in the chat. I put the link at the top somewhere. So if you want to jump on, man. We are 25 minutes in. It's just the point where he's just discovering everything. I've seen the review, Sean. I've seen it. I know he didn't. Yeah, Dan. There's me in the comment section saying, "Oh, you do know that the Candyman story was originally set in Liverpool?" And then I go and watch the full video, and there you go, and just say exactly what I told you. I was like, "Oh, fucking hell! I should have known you'd know." But yeah, Clive Barker, man. Clive Barker went to the same. I think he went to the same. How would you call it? We call it senior school. I think you may call it high school. I think he went to the same high school as maybe John Lennon. I'm not quite sure. But he went to the school he went to as a child. Like very young. Was kind of like very close to where I grew up. Like 5-10 minutes away. But yeah, so the origins of Candyman were set in Liverpool. And Candyman was originally white as well. So a bit of cultural appropriation going on there. Like, I'll go there. Forget it. Yes, I've not actually read any Clive. I think the only Clive Barker I think I might have read Nightbreed back in the day, and I like the Nightbreed film as well. The Nightbreed film is it's like nobody ever mentions that film, and it's so underrated, and it's got some real creepy sort of like some real creepy shit in it. David Cronenberg is like that mask he wears. Fucking hell, man, that is like terrifying. Clive Barker, a very nice guy. Yeah, I think he's mainly based in LA now. I think, isn't he, Sean? He's very much part of the a few years ago. Books of Blood. I think that is the Books of Blood is not the short stories which involves Candyman. Because the Nightbreed. I don't think I've seen the director's cut. I just remember watching the film back in the day, and yeah, it was just such a bizarre film. I seem to remember there was a video game as well, like just released on, like, the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, the Nightbreed game, and it was just, I remember like the cover art was just like that bizarre, like sort of big fat thing with like a head that comes down, and its neck's there, and it's like its head comes right down. It's just weird. This is just a scene where he's just discovering, like, all the bodies stitched together, holding hands. That's interesting. I'm not quite sure how they'd go about doing a TV show, I suppose. That would be like me. As I said before, you guys came on board. I never realised this was set in Florida and filmed in Florida. I assumed this was like sort of maybe Texas or like Alabama or Georgia, because the impression you give at the start of the film is that it's kind of like, I'm trying not to sound insulting now, but hillbilly country. They kind of make fun of like the local radio stations, like saying, "Oh, it's all about Jesus," and they kind of impersonate the locals and, like, do like those hillbilly accents, redneck accents. But I always assumed that, like, Florida wasn't like that. I thought Florida was like, I know Florida's like quite southern, or very southern, but I never like thought Florida was like, you know was like that sort of place. I just thought it was, well, yeah. So when I found out it was set in Florida and filmed in Florida, I was a bit surprised. I just assumed that, it was sort of somewhere like, maybe, yeah, in the deep south, like the proper deep south, like. I don't mind if he's working his way down the list. It depends where you are. I suppose it's a big place. I mean, yeah, it's. I see what you're saying, Dan. It's an entire state. You're probably talking somewhere that's bigger than the whole of Britain. But I kind of like the idea that this was, more like sort of more like the Midwest, or maybe like the sort of, like the Texas sort of thing, rather than Florida. It doesn't really go with like what my feelings of the film are. Lorne's on board. What's up, Lorne? Hello. I'm not quite. Hello. Okay, Lord. I'm not quite sure what that even says. I can't even read that. Hey, that's... He's good. It's good there, Dan. Watch it back. Good guy. Fellow Brits, you know. Lorne's just an Anglophile. Lorne loves us. He loves us Brits. We are 33 minutes in. Lorne, if you want to jump on, man, the link's in the description, I think, somewhere. So if you want to click on, jump in the chat. Well, jump in the stream, mate. It's starting to go. It's a little bit cliched when they go to this sort of bar and everyone's kind of like just weird and looking at them like they're just complete outsiders. I mean, this is such a cliche in like horror films where it's almost as like they're not all in on it, but it feels like they are all in on the secret. That like they all know that this thing exists. I don't think they do know that. Well, I think some maybe know, but some don't. But it's almost as like, you know, the entire town is against them. I do like that scene where the Cooper just drives off. Come on, I'm waiting for Pizza's review as well. I've seen Dan's review. Yeah, I'm not. I'll watch it when it drops on streaming. I'm not going to cinema. I'm not paying, you know, like £8 to go and watch Candyman. It's pork chop. That's never happening, Dan. It's going to be a fan long. I've not seen 3, so I couldn't say. I would say no, probably not. It's just a case of you put them away for, and then wait 23 years and do what they do at the beginning of part 2. Just be ready. But then that went wrong as well. So Dan Richardson. Has there ever been a small town in any film ever where people are normal? This is very reminiscent of American Werewolf in London. You know, it's just you got the 2 American guys turn up in this small like Yorkshire village, and everybody just looks at them like they're just like from outer space. And this is kind of like a similar setup. It's like anybody's not from within like 50 miles of where they're from, and they're just like complete freaks. The fan has been several weapons. I definitely don't want to see that film then. Oh god. I think the third van's been taken over by ISIS, by the sounds of it. Problem is, there is a way to push it on, but no one's done it. I've not even seen the sequels to Candyman. Like I say, the first film, I don't mind. Not a massive fan. Didn't see any of the sequels. I'll watch the new one on streaming, but not really. No big desire to see it. You say with a lot of horror films now, there's too much preaching, too much agenda, too much agenda, and just not enough just good storytelling. So let's yeah. Although one thing I've seen apparently is the Friday the 13th fan film with is it Tina from the original from Friday Part 7? She's going to reprise the role in a fan film for Friday the 13th, which is the only way we're going to get any sort of Friday the 13th action now, is because we're not getting any sort of anything in terms of like real official movies. So it looks like fan films is the way to go now for Friday the 13th, which is a bit depressing. But if they can knock it out the park like Never Hike Alone, then I'll take that. I'll take a film like that every year for as long as possible. If it means if we're not getting anything else, but I desperately want an official Friday the 13th film. Oh, I didn't really make up what's going on. Not that I'm aware of. I'm not in the loop regarding Elm Street. From what I'm aware of, there's nothing going on with Elm Street. I've heard nothing. Robert Englund's far too old. I've heard nothing about anyone new stepping into the shoes. Like I say, it's well, I've not said it before. Well, I think I've mentioned it before, but it's a blessing and a curse having a character like Freddy Krueger, because obviously someone as charismatic as Robert Englund playing a character like that, you know, it's going to get bums on seats like it did in the 80s. But when that shtick sort of dies out a little bit, and if you want to like reboot it, you can't just bring back Robert Englund. You're going to have to get somebody new because he's too old, and people want to see Robert Englund. But because he's got a face, because he's got a personality, you can't just do it like that. That's where the bonus of Halloween and Friday the 13th comes in. It's like you get a big guy, put a mask on them, get them to walk in a certain way, and you're good to go. So it's always going to benefit them two franchises in the long term. In the short term, in the 80s, yeah, Freddy was king. But as time's gone on, yeah, I mean, where is Freddy now? In terms of the franchises, it's Halloween, then it's Jason. Well, it's Michael, Jason, then Freddy. Or maybe it's Michael, Jason, Chucky, then Freddy. Maybe even Leatherface in front of Freddy. So, I mean, in terms of like what's gone on in the last few years, Leatherface is definitely getting up there, you know, ahead of Freddy. And Jason's managed to stay near the top, probably due to the video game as well. But yeah, I mean, what happens with? I've totally lost my train of thought. But in terms of, in terms of Friday the 13th, and you know, just hope they can get their shit sorted and just get to making something new. But who knows? Is in development. Well, a couple of years away then. Who are they going to get for Freddy though? That's the thing. It's just not going to be Robert Englund. Robert Englund may not be with us in 2 years' time, so. I think something's coming soon. Yeah, Dan. Looks like Lawrence sort of confirmed that as well. Yeah, so there is something going on, but you say it's 2023. That's I don't know who would you cast as Freddy? I can't think of anybody. It's. I mean. A lot of people in the past have mentioned, and he's too old now, a perfect Freddy would have been Kevin Bacon, and I agree with that. He's the right size, the right height, he's kind of like the right build, But obviously, Kevin Bacon's far too big, far too big star, far too old as well. But you need someone physically. They've got to be, you know, sort of like around the 5'8", 5'9" mark. Very, very, very slim. No fat on them whatsoever. And be ultra charismatic. But I don't know who you'd pick. Maybe, and this is going to come from left field now, but the guy from Saturday Night Live who's in the Suicide Squad, with the blonde hair, his name escapes me. I could see him as Freddy Krueger, but yeah, I mean, I'm just touching at straws now. I'm just trying to think of people who like fit that description of fit the that build. But it's got to be someone. It can't be some big hulking brute. You've got to go small and wiry for the character. Only way to make Freddy's getting enough money. Other people can make that role their own. As far as the sequels go, it was made for the franchise. It would be Kevin Bacon. He's not appropriate for Freddy's a new backstory. I mean, Kevin Bacon is embarrassed by Friday the 13th, so I'd be amazed if he showed any interest in this anyway. But I mean, what's Kevin Bacon doing nowadays? Is he really doing anything? Maybe he'd be grateful for the role. I don't know. I'll talk Freddy. I'm in. Yeah. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, he's shrunk now, so maybe he could fit the role. I mean, he's probably only about my height now, Ronnie. I know he's like 6'2" back in the day, but he's probably shrunk to about 5'9" now. And I don't think he's certainly not as muscly as he used to be. We are 45 minutes in. It's the scene where the creeper just jumps on top of the police car, just in case anyone's not watching along. I always like the scene because I always kind of felt that the police were in on the whole thing and they kind of knew. But obviously, with this scene, yeah, they have no idea. Nobody does. But I was kind of like didn't want the creeper to be revealed as much. I kind of like the creeper when he's just at the side of the road with the coat on and just looking from the distance, and you just see this figure, and you can't really make out any features. I love that about this film, and as the film progresses and you just see everything, it kind of like they probably did need to do that, but it just took it lost a bit of the mystery to me. So I did enjoy the opening like half of the movie over the second half of the movie. He's still doing all right for himself, isn't he? I think he's still doing quite a lot of work. I remember seeing him in a film with Haley Joel Osment a few years ago. Then Morrison and someone like Kelly McLaughlin. I don't even know who that is, Lon. I have no idea who that is. I'm guessing he's someone quite famous, but This is the scene, I think, where one of the first things where you really see what he's about, the creeper. I don't like the whistling though. I just, it makes it too human. I prefer more. Just sniffing the skull. I do like this scene. This is a great scene. This is really big. You get what he's about as well, you know. Just looks like actors there. Yeah, I was gonna say, I've seen him quite a lot of stuff. Is the do you know? I think you know what? I don't really know because I'm not really because it's. I've last time I've seen this film was like 15 years, 10, 15 years ago, and I've seen the sequel 10 years ago. I was just under the impression he was kind of like a sort of Stephen King type, you know, urban legend type beast that would come to life and just like, I don't know, I honestly don't know. Just kind of like urban legend made real in a way. But man was cheap as a vehicle. Yeah, he was definitely that. Like I say, it was totally different. I mean, I said this at the start of the video before anyone came on board. But if you look at the sort of like late 90s, you know, we've gone through the whole rebirth of the slasher genre from like 96 with Scream. For like 4 or 5 years, we were just inundated with slasher movies. Then we started getting the found footage movies. And then in between the slasher movies and the found footage movies and the remakes, we got this in 2001. And it didn't really start, not that I'm aware, but it didn't really start a sort of trend of monster movie, because it is a monster movie. You know, the creeper is a monster. It didn't really start any sort of trend that I remember. And it kind of like stands out alone as kind of like, just this monster movie from 2001. And as I say, I just remember it getting, this movie got rave reviews when it came out. It was from in the UK anyway. This movie was like really, really loved. I think this is like early days of the internet, so I think a lot of the British press weren't aware of Victor Salva's history. So I think if they'd been aware that this film would have like tanked, but the film did, you know, pretty well. But as I say, I think he benefited from, like, because I had no idea about Victor Salva, and don't think anybody else in the UK did. So if it'd been widely known about his, you know, indiscretions, this film would not have done as well as what it did. That confirms that the keeper used to be human. A script is at one point set in the Old West. That was how told his own story. Okay. I was going to say I don't. Yeah, I was going to say I don't think I was. I don't remember in anything in the film describing anything. I was thinking that like maybe there's a backstory that, you know, obviously Salva knows about, or the original writer. I don't know if who actually wrote the story, whether it was Salva or. Female being a Morrison third film. Yeah. Oh, what's up? Oak? What's up, man? Well, we're halfway through, man. If you want to stay on board, hopefully. But apparently they are doing a new trilogy of Jeepers Creepers films, which completely nothing to do with Victor Salva. Like we've got the new film dropping at the end of the year. How it's going to drop at the end of the year, I have no idea, because I've not seen any sort of footage, anything about this film. So I don't know how it's going to drop at the end of the year. But apparently there's going to be 3 new films, which I don't mind. I'll quite happily, take 3 new Jeepers Creepers films, because I think what it is with something like Jeepers Creepers, I'm not a die-hard Jeepers Creepers fan, so I'll take 3 new films. If it was Halloween or Friday the 13th and they were just churning out shit, then I'd be like, well, hang on a minute, you're tarnishing reputation. But with Jeepers Creepers, for me, there's one great film. I don't care what happens with the rest of the franchise. So if you just want to churn out a load of shit, if some of it's good, I'll take that all day long. So if they want to do 3 new films, that's all good with me. Whereas if they just said they were going to do another 3 Halloween films, I'd be like, well, hang on a minute. Quality control, is this going to be up to an acceptable standard? But when it comes to Jeepers Creepers, I don't care. I like the first film. The second film's not bad. Third film I've never seen, don't particularly want to see. But yeah, if they want to do 3 new films, I'm down for that. I'll fucking watch that. Because I say I've got no emotional ties to the franchise. I just like the first film and that's it. Whereas Halloween and Friday the 13th, I've got that means a lot to me. I don't want to see that tarnished. I don't want to see the legacy it's already been tarnished by some of the films, but I don't want to see it tarnished to an endless degree. Folks watching pre-season football? You're watching pre-season American football, Lord. Football is a sport which is played in Europe and South America and everywhere else in the world. You call it soccer, it's called football. You watching American football, where a bunch of men wear big pads and basically need protecting because they're not as hard as, not as tough as rugby players. Just gonna put that out there. I thought 7 was Gage Law. I don't gamble at all. My only vice is alcohol. That's it. No drugs, no gambling, just alcohol. Oh, hang on. Sorry, Lord. Oh, there he is. Are you muted, Lorne?
I'm always muted.
Yeah. Oh, that was me.
Or another layout where I'm not quite as huge.
Nice to see someone, Joe. I've always been a bit weird. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, fine. No, I'm always... I put the link out a couple of times in the past, but because I'm comfortable being like the guest, but being the host, I'm like a bit, always a bit nervous almost.
If I can do it, anyone can do it because I'm awkward as hell.
Are you watching the film now?
No.
Okay. Sorry, I was saying, but you're well aware of the film, the film's history, yeah. I mean, we're just, I say, 57 minutes in. It's.
So what?
I mean,
and are they in the police station yet?
No, they've.
They got to be close.
I've been distracted in the chat, so they've just been seen with the police are chasing him, and the creepers got on top of the police car, and he's just killed. He's just wiped out the police. So I think they get to the police station after this, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. As I say, usually what happens in live commentaries, I just get distracted by the chat and then just totally lose track of the film I'm watching. But yeah, it's I think they're just going to the house of is it the blind woman? Was she blind? I can't remember. Was she blind?
It's been a long time since I watched it. I don't remember.
Yeah.
The whole concept with eyes in the film is just like
yeah.
They just needed to show what it was doing. Yeah, so I was like, let's find an actor with bright blue eyes.
Well, what I was saying at the beginning of the stream before anyone jumped on board was 2000. This is basically a monster movie.
Yep.
I would describe it as a monster movie. Now, 96, obviously Scream dropped, and we just had this, massive surge of slasher films. And then in 99, you got like the found footage thing kicked in with Blair Witch. But obviously, you still had the sort of slasher films going forward. You still had, Cherry Falls dropped in 2000. And I think slasher films were still kind of a thing until the early noughties before it went more towards the torture porn aspect. But like I said at the beginning of the stream, this film kind of it might not stand alone, but to me, my memory's vague, but I don't really remember this. It didn't start a resurgence of monster movies that I remember. It just kind of came and went. And it's kind of like almost unique at the time because 2001 was like a strange time in horror. It was kind of as I say, it was kind of, we were just before the torture porn.
A couple of years.
Sort of found footage was really finding its feet. But at the same time, we were sort of coming towards the end of the slasher resurgence maybe was sort of coming towards the end again because Scream 3, I think, dropped in 2000. I Know What You Did Last Summer was irrelevant by 2001. And I think Urban Legend, that only had one decent film. The two sequels were awful. So I think the point I was trying to make is this film doesn't really... I'm not going to compare it to Texas Chainsaw Massacre in any way, but it kind of came at a time and went away, and it didn't really influence anything, and wasn't really, not that I don't really see it as being influenced by anything, not at that time anyway. It might have been influenced by an older film, but in terms of when it dropped, it just seemed to just. Would you agree, or?
So, I would sort of agree and sort of disagree. I think where it had an influence is on the French extreme movement. Because if you look at a lot, not Martyrs or Inside, but other films around the periphery, you start to see a lot of that kind of same aesthetic. High Tension definitely has sort of a similar aesthetic to the Jeepers Creepers. Frontiers does as well. Not necessarily monster movies, but the type of visceral violence and wide open spaces, creating isolation without isolating the characters. There's things that the first Jeepers Creepers does very well. What I think always held the film back for me is that it changes what it's trying to do midway, because it's a great kind of Duel meets The Hitcher, but a monster film for the first half, and that all works for me really well. When it kind of tries to become more of an action film in its second half, I feel it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't lead to a big American renaissance of monster films. And I don't know that we'll ever have another one. I mean, people say the same thing about Relic, the 90s film.
Yeah.
It didn't lead to any American kaiju movement. That's for damn sure. It's just, for some reason, America doesn't really ever embrace the traditional, universal style monster ever again. And every time someone tries, it just kind of lands without anyone noticing or anyone caring.
I just find it another thing with this film is, you know, the sheer number of dead bodies, like over the years, and like it's like the police that they never ever come to the conclusion that we've got a major problem with. You know,
Yeah, well, but that's just a regular horror movie problem, really. Ultimately, I mean, at a certain point, you don't open the summer camp ever again, or you don't let anyone on that property. Hell, you might not let anyone in the town after you're in the triple digits. Who still lives there? You know what I'm saying? So this kind of has that same problem of if this was for real, of course the creeper couldn't operate the way he operates, but because it's so stylized, you don't really give it too much of a worry. When I saw this film in theaters, I liked it, but I didn't love it, and I felt it was trying too hard to make a horror icon. I always hate when films go out of their way to try and create a horror icon. That's the reason that Shocker is a great example. I think it's a bad film, but I think that like what's the most painful thing about Shocker is so obvious that Wes Craven was like, I want to make another Freddy.
I really like Shocker.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because I saw Shocker as a kid, probably about 15, so it was probably a couple of years after release, and didn't think much of it at the time because I think I was looking for another masked killer, and he was too, you know, when you're a kid, you just want that, you know, cool Freddy, or I know Freddy didn't wear a mask, but you want that sort of cool, like, iconic character. And because this guy came along and he was kind of like this middle-aged guy, just as a TV repairman who just happened to be a serial killer, and he didn't like tick the boxes for someone of a 14-year-old kid. But going back to watch it, I think about 3 years ago, I had a really good time with the film. I mean, I think with Shocker, it came out a really bad. I was actually going to do a video of this, but I think '89 was a really bad year to try and release a new like horror icon. I'm not saying Wes Craven intended to release a new horror icon onto the.
I think that's exactly what he was trying to do.
Well, he picked a bad year to do it because, like, you know, we all know '89 was like the death knell for horror in terms of like that type of horror. You know, once we got into the '90s, it was a lot more serious, a lot more dark, a lot more realistic. And you know, we got the Silence of the Lambs and films like it got a lot more in terms of like an obsession with serial killers, like real serial killers, rather than these comedy serial killers. But I think if he'd released Shocker back in, you know, maybe 84, 83, he could have gone on to become maybe not as big as Freddy, but certainly a lot bigger than what he was. You know, Horace Pinker could have been a reasonably sized sort of horror icon of the 80s. But I say '89 was a bad year to be trying to bring out a new, you know, icon. And
I just get I don't know. I don't have a lot good to say about the film. I just think it's really unfocused. I think Mitch Pileggi was trying as hard as anyone to make it work. I don't fault him, but I think everything is so broad in that movie and untethered, and all three acts are kind of different movies. Like his villain powers change every act. It's just very unfocused to me, and it doesn't really work. I would say that Max Jenke from The Horror Show or House 3, way more successful about trying to launch a horror icon, and that didn't work either. You know.
Another point I was going to make actually about in terms of Wes Craven is he's kind of like known for the period between like 70. Last House on the Left was 74, 73, so like around that time, and through to Nightmare on Elm Street. That's kind of like considered as like, you know, his peak. It is prime, yeah. But I mean, obviously you're not a fan of Shocker, but in terms of like what he did after Elm Street, you know, Shocker, which I do like, Last House on the Left, not Last House Left, sorry, People Under the Stairs,
Don't like that
New
either.
Night. So that obviously we differ.
Serpent in the Rainbow is the only thing I like in his late career.
Yeah, I think he had. I think he had a good run from like the late '80s through to Scream, because New Nightmare, for what everyone thinks about it, that was trying to do something totally new. It didn't work at the time. Maybe they
I don't
weren't
know
quite
about totally.
well. In terms of like,
Are we going to pretend I Madman doesn't exist?
well, I mean, maybe in
That's
terms
the
of like
same concept. It's exactly.
yeah.
It's the same concept of, hey, there's a character from a book that escapes because your imagination gives him life and your fear gives him power. It's the same movie.
I think in terms of like
Fulci's Nightmare Concert, Cat in the Brain, is where the rest of the concept was from. So I don't see it as this bold original film. I just don't.
maybe not as bold.
For commercial, maybe.
But in terms of like for a mainstream audience, if you're looking at you know, in terms of like going back to when I was like 18, 1984, that dropping on cinemas, for the average person going into the cinema that night, they haven't got a clue who Lucio Fulci is.
No.
I didn't. So to them, it's just something that's like, it's Freddy Krueger, but it's not Freddy Krueger. It's like, well, it is Freddy Krueger, but he's there and he's playing. You know, so in terms of like an average audience, and I certainly was at that point, I didn't have any idea. So to people going into a cinema in 1984, that would be something that would be completely, to an average moviegoer. I'm not talking about, you know, a hardcore fan of films, but you know, I mean, you could argue all day. I mean, you could say that, like, you know, anyone who says that Scary Movie is the first film to parody horror films, and you could say, well, Student Bodies did it in 1981. You know, it's there's always
Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Yeah. I mean, there's always someone
that's not the
before.
first either. The horror comedies go back to the beginning of horror.
Yeah.
I was never on the Wes Craven trip where a lot of people want to conflate him with someone like a John Carpenter or a Tobe Hooper. Like, you take the bad work from Tobe Hooper and you can still see his imprint on it. But you take the worst of Craven and you see, whether it's Hills Have Eyes 2, whether it is My Soul to Take, and man, they feel like generic cinema for their time. Both. Like, Hills Have Eyes 2 looks like every horror movie that was made at that time. It does nothing special about that movie. Except, the boneheaded script, but that's the only reason people like it, is its flaws at this point. But even earlier in his career, is anyone going to make a real strong impassioned plea for a Deadly Blessing? You know?
I don't think I've seen Deadly Blessing. Is that the 18? Was it like 18-1? 19? Yeah, I've not seen that film, I don't think.
It's all right, but that's the point. It's all right. It doesn't stand out, and that's why people don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Wes Craven's one of those guys that a few times in his career, he knocked it out of the park. I don't include Scream in that, but most people do. That's fine. We can disagree. But Nightmare on Elm Street, Last House on the Left, Hills Have Eyes, Serpent in the Rainbow, these are high points for the genre. So no one can take that away from him. But the problem is, they're a minority of his films.
Yeah.
To me. In my opinion, obviously.
Dan says, I got to talk to Tom Sizemore about Relic at Chiller for all the scandals with him. I must say he was really nice to my nephew Nico. Yeah, I've heard Tom Sizemore. I've heard mixed stories about Tom Sizemore. He can be a nice guy, and he can also be a complete and utter dick. But, you know, I suppose it depends which day of the week you meet him on. I know he had I always had these drug problems, to say the least. So I suppose I was watching Piz's Scream stream earlier on, and he kind of takes the same opinion of me, is that Scream kind of gave a rebirth to the horror genre, and I've seen people say that Scream didn't basically reboot the genre in the 90s. I think it did. I think Piz agrees with me. I think that horror, I don't know if it was you, I hope it wasn't you, Lord, you said that it was wrong, that it was always strong in the 90s.
No,
Maybe that wasn't you.
I talk constantly about the great horror, the great '90s.
Yeah, there was there was a fairly prominent YouTuber, I think, who's like saying that it never. Oh, it was Sinister. I don't know if you know Sinister Cinema Reviews. He's he's a pretty big YouTuber, like, but he said basically that he was of the opinion that it never dropped. And I was totally. I mean,
I'd be very interested in how old he was at the time through the '90s.
I think he's younger than us.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like I say, I remember distinctly.
So when we talk to younger guys, even people like Christian Hanna or Andrew from Devon Grahams, the problem I think they have is that they were video store kids first and foremost, more than theater goers at that age. And if you look at the video store experience, yeah, there's plenty of stuff coming out that you can love throughout the '90s. So from your perspective, it might seem like everything was groovy, but for the theatrical horror fans, oh, it was a horrific period, the worst of my life for going to the movies.
Yeah.
And that's not saying there weren't high points. The original Candyman, awesome film. I think a horror classic on par with anything. But, you know, what else did we get that year? Phantoms? Come on.
Yeah, so is that your Pepsi Max?
I just bought Pepsi Max today. How'd you know? But no, it's not. It's a Coke Zero.
No, to go back to what you said, I mean, absolutely. I mean, for someone who was born in '76, he was used. I mean, I was a bit young because you know very well the system in the cinemas in the UK. If you're under 18, it's not like America. You just can't go with an adult. You've got to be over 18 to see the film. So I couldn't actually see horror films legally in the UK until 1994, unless obviously they just turned a blind eye. So 93 was probably my earliest seeing horror films, but I distinctly remember, like, from the very early 90s, even in video stores, there were still horror films being released in Blockbuster and, you know, the independent stores, but the level, it just dropped off. You could see almost on a monthly basis the sections shrink and shrink and shrink. You know, and
big studios weren't interested. There was no money in it for them.
Exactly.
You know what? The film that no one discusses ever, and I'm guilty. I don't discuss it. If you want to talk about that video store boom, there's one film that came out that changed pretty much everything for the horror genre in direct-to-video. It's a film called Runestone.
Never heard of it.
And that's a shame, because when it came out in, I think, 93 or 94, the genre was already kind of like, you know, floating in the ether. And most people didn't rent things that were made direct-to-video because you assumed they were really bad quality. And Runestone had a completely different reputation. Hey, this is a film that was made for the video market, but it's a real movie. And all the video stores picked it up, and everyone that was a horror fan rented it, and suddenly it was okay, legitimate, for there to be just a flood of these movies direct-to-video. The only exception to that, of course, someone will point out that Full Moon had made a business of it on the video cassette era coming out through Paramount. And that is true, but that's kind of the exception to the rule. And honestly, we overplay our hand about how good those movies are, because they're not really, honestly, very good. You might feel warm and fuzzy about them, but most of them have serious, serious problems. So Runestone, look up Runestone if you want to see the film that got the '90s video wave to actually endure.
Yeah, Dan knows Runestone.
Does not surprise me.
Yeah,
Dan has seen more horror films than I have, and
Dan's a legend with horror films.
He is. I've seen a lot, but Dan's got me beat.
Jamie's in the chat. Hello, Jamie. Is he on board? So we are in the police station now, I think. We are 1 minute set. We're coming to the conclusion of the film.
Real quickly, because I don't know if there was a lack of coverage or what, but that last 10 minutes just flies as amount of plot they're trying to cover.
I say that we were talking about the sequel. The only, like I said to I think it was DJ. what I remember, the sequel was basically a really good opening scene with the creepers on like a scarecrow on like the cross, and he briefly looks away. I really like that scene at the beginning of part 2, and just a really, really overly long sequence on a bus. And you really see
that film should just have been Ray Wise hunting the creeper. That's it.
Well, when you see, a lot of like semi-naked young, I won't say boys, they're like 18, 19-year-old sunbathing. Because you understand Victor Salva's what he was going for with that film.
He is a red-blooded American man. I don't know what you're talking about. No, listen, I don't really have... The weird thing about Victor Salva, if we're going to talk about it, is that I don't think he's a good person. I don't particularly want to support him unless he really knocks something out of the park, and then you support him by proxy of what he created, right? But he didn't kill anyone. And that's always where I hate when people equate him, or even talk about him in harsher terms than, people, film directors whose ineptitude actually led to deaths. Or even, I mean, if you read about the case, it's not even as grotesque as the Polanski case, ultimately. So I just feel like I'm not the guy screaming for everyone to separate the art from the artist, because I think that that's a fool's errand. But I don't know. I don't need to support him personally. I'm not as angry as I am with other people.
I don't think it's possible to separate the art from the artist anyway, because if you do that, you're never going to watch it. Who knows how effed up people are? Who you don't know the history of it. You wouldn't watch anything or read any, because everybody's got, especially in Hollywood, everybody's just skeletons in the closet.
Mike, your screen name is the Fifth Beatle, John Lennon.
I'm well aware of John Lennon's past.
Not a great.
Well aware. No, it wasn't. No.
So I mean, so what it comes down to is just you have to go into all this with your eyes open and make, as a guy whose teachings I don't follow once said, let your conscience be your God. If you feel that it's not a big deal to you, then that's great. It's not a big deal to you. Don't let anyone tell you it should be. If, on the other hand, you can't take what someone has done, you don't need to support people you don't like, or that you disapprove of. If the Taliban release a film tomorrow, I'm not buying a ticket. Right?
I think we're both agree on that.
Yeah, but by the same rate, if the best person in the world, the most honorable, trustworthy, super awesome person in the world releases a bad film, I'm not buying a ticket to that either. So it's a complex picture. You got to do what you're comfortable with.
Cool. I was when I was watching your video before, I posed the question about a good rural horror movie set in England. But
I thought you meant novels. I'm sorry. I didn't mean novels, but I think I wasn't really aiming at anything like set in the past.
What I wanted to ask him was I really like these. I mean, I don't know whether you've ever read any of these, but almost like horror novels, not like thriller horror novels, but set the depths of Cornwall or the Highlands of Scotland. Where it's just it's cut off and it's a small town, and it's a bit of a, because I don't really know how would I really Google that to find it, because it's hard. Because
I read a British novel called Wisteria Cottage forever ago, and it's nothing that's well known or anything. It's just a paperback I found at a yard sale, right? And I think it's exactly what you're talking about, but I don't even know the name of the author. I'd have to find the book, and it's probably in a box somewhere in a closet, because I don't have enough bookshelves to fill my, and frankly, my house would be nothing but bookshelves, as you can probably imagine. So
yeah, no, because a lot of crime and a lot of thriller and a lot of horror novels, they tend to focus around London, the big cities, and doesn't interest me. I just like the idea of something like a bit of a mystery, maybe a horror elements, but really set in like the sort of like a real very rural set. As like an American equivalent would be, somewhere just in the middle of nowhere. Just
You're looking for the British equivalent of the Southern Gothic.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that is. I can't really help you there, but the reason that I think that that's appealing is because in cities it's hard to have a real sense of isolation.
Yeah.
Right, and isolation is one of the Lovecraft's 3 rules. It's alone, in the dark, and wet. And the third one is kind of fallen out of fashion, but the ocean used to be really, really, really scary at a time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, how do you isolate people in a city in New York City? Help is never really that far away, right? So,
yeah.
And that's also the problem today with our technology. Today, in order to tell a story successfully, you have to create a big bad monster that a cell phone call won't dissuade or won't affect the outcome of. Because to pretend that cell phones don't exist, or worse, to throw a cell phone in pudding, it's just lame, right?
I mean, I think that's one of the things I like about Jeepers Creepers. And obviously, I mean, I live in a city, so it's like 600,000-700,000 people. The wider area is probably like 1.5 million people. So it's I can drive for miles and just be never really hit what you would call rural in England, because England's such a small country. We never really get that level of isolation that you could get like driving, like in Jeepers Creepers, where they're just driving and they say we haven't seen a car for like 20 miles. That would never happen in the UK because it's such a small country. You'd have to drive to the Highlands of Scotland, and even then you'd see a car before then. So I think that's the thing, we, especially as Brits, we love that sense of like, a film like Jeepers Creepers, we love that sense of isolation where it's terrifying for us because we can't relate to that, because you would never be able to set a film like Jeepers Creepers in the UK, because after 10 miles you'd hit there'd be a motorway or a service station or a village or a city. So I think that's one of the great things about we love about American films. That style of American film is you can believably drive and be completely cut off and be stalked by a psychopathic monster and be helpless to a point. Obviously, in the age of cell phones, that's going to become increasingly difficult. I think we discussed this before on a previous stream, but it is going to be an issue going forward. But
I think we just have to, storytellers, to adjust to the world we live in. The biggest problem I see with a lot of modern film is that they're still trying to do the 80s thing, and we don't live in the 80s.
Yeah.
So, like, even if you're setting it in the 80s, the people are not watching it in the 80s. So we do this separation to the event, saying, oh, well, this takes place then. The problem is people have to feel personally like this could happen to them, that they can relate to the feelings or the situations. And you can't. If you automatically add, okay, this takes place before, automatically it's not scary. So today's writers and filmmakers need to embrace our world and figure out what scares us today that's not fixable in the ways that old problems used to be fixable, In the 30s, how many times did a car break down and you ended up staying at a big house with some creepy-ass guy, right? Mm. Well, today, that's not an issue because you just call AAA from your cell phone, right? I mean, so you can't tell those stories. And if you do still try to tell those stories, you start spending so much time making the mechanism to get that to be in play and feel realistic that you're wasting so much valuable time for a conceit to tell a story rather than actually just telling a compelling story that people will relate to. So
that makes a good point actually in the chat. Kind of slightly different to the point you're making, but in terms of the new Candyman movie, you can feel that in the new Candyman. The 1992 film set and felt truly dangerous. And I think what he's referring to is with the new Candyman film is the the gentrification of Cabrini Green as in relation to the '92 film, and what I've heard about that movie is, and I've seen some. And you're laughing there. So have you seen it?
No, I read The Treatment 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And everything's confirmed. I'll see it probably this weekend, but yeah, it's gonna be trash. There's no way you can start from that screenplay and not end up with trash.
Well, I've heard that it's not very scary and it's a bit heavy-handed in its message, which was my fear. And when it started getting like really, really good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes by the critics,
and then as soon as the real reviews start coming in, it starts falling.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Isolation and Candyman, because I think it's a good point. So the original Candyman is intentionally told from a white point of view. That's why Helen.
It was set in Liverpool, wasn't it? The original story by Clive Barker. But
that's so different.
I know. I know. I'm just.
When we talk about the film,
yeah,
it's intentionally told from Helen, a white woman's point of view. So she enters this closed community, right? A place where white people don't go. And that's where the isolation is. It maintains isolation no matter what population, simply because the point of view character is entering racially and culturally a forbidden place. So it all works. The new film has a problem because its point of view character is an African American in an African American enclave. And no, Dan, I'm well aware, but that point of view can't make the material work, not as horror anyway. And it's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. You could have told a great story from that point of view, but then you have to lose a lot of the things that make Candyman. And instead, they made a message piece that'll play really okay to certain audiences for 6 months, but it's going to be laughed at in 2 years. So, whatever.
I'm just wondering whether I've not seen the film. I'm just wondering whether they've set up a sequel at the end of the film. I'm not. Because obviously, are they looking to try?
They've set up plenty of opportunity for sequels, but none of them are going to happen. The same way the sequel that was set up by the original film never happened. You know, I mean, we never got the Helen movie. Well, we kind of did. It's called Candyman. Yeah. We never got the outright, okay, now that we've established that Helen is the villain, what now? We didn't get that movie. And we shouldn't have gotten that movie, by the way. It is a franchise. I kind of like the second film, but I got to squint and hold my head at a cocked angle when I watch it. But it really works stronger as a standalone piece without anything else.
I've never even seen the sequels. I was never a massive fan of the original film. I mean,
I love the original film.
Yeah, I think it's each to his own. I mean, it's. I mean, I saw a review. I mean, Drum Dums on YouTube. He's quite a big YouTuber. He had to defend in the comment section. He had to defend his description, calling it an urban film, because people called him out saying it was a racist saying. I was like, well, and I just replied. I said, well, if Cabrini Green is an urban, then I don't know what is. Is that the very definition of it? I mean, is urban not mean like an inner city setting? It's not describing.
It's the traditional vocabulary. So there's a movement on right now with people who want to change the culture, or pretending to want to change the culture so they get attention, whichever it may be. And both can be true, by the way. You know, there can be people who legitimately want to change the culture. There can be people who just want attention. There can be people who want both. Okay. But they're using vocabulary as a weapon. They've weaponized words. So urban does not mean African American. It doesn't. However, they're using it to mean that so that certain types of criticism can't be ever applied. And this is a big disservice to African Americans, by the way, who've worked goddamn hard in our society to go from being property to being president of the United States in 100 years. That does not happen in most societies. America is a good place that has lots of obstacles, lots of problems, but the general core of possibility that we have is amazing. And for anyone to treat people like they're Fabergé eggs that are going to get broken by any obstacle in front of them ignores the history of African Americans in this country who have striven the entire time, often with no help. It drives me nuts. Don't weaponize words. Let people shine for what they're great at.
Yeah, Dan says, I don't know Dum Dums personally, but man, that review was suspect, which actually takes me on to a really good point you made, Dan. I mean, I'm not trying to say that he's had words put into his mouth, but I do question some of these bigger YouTubers with a lot of these reviews coming through, and I do wonder just where they stand and are they taking backhanders off company?
I wish it was that simple. I think that they honestly just look out there, see what the mood is.
Yeah, you could be right there.
And then they lean into how they already feel if they kind of agree with it. The big problem I have is that you never get it was okay as a review anymore. Everything's either awesome, this reignited my love for the genre, or it's, oh, that was completely awful, I hated everything. You never get people just say, it was okay.
Yeah.
And not if you run a channel, you don't. So
I think with a film like The New Candyman, there's always baggage before it's even released. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit like Ghostbusters 2016, where before the film came out, you had all this big push for it was like it's women and this, that, and the other, and there was almost a feeling before the film came out that if anybody gave it a bad review, and I remember the angry video game Cine Massacre, whatever his name is, he's a massive YouTuber, he just refused to review it or give it a score because he was that pissed off with the whole situation, where it almost felt like that anybody who gave it a bad review was a misogynist. It was a bad film. It was just a bad film. But when the film dropped, there was this feeling that almost because there'd been this big push regarding the fact that it was for women, that you couldn't criticize it. And I always feel like with some of the newer films, if there's kind of like anything where there's like an agenda behind it, you can't. People are going to be scared to sort of just give an honest opinion because they're kind of concerned that with Candyman, maybe some people who've got a considerable YouTube following are kind of going to play it safe and say it's a good film. Now they may think it's a good film, but there'd be a certain percentage of these big YouTubers who don't think it's a good film, but they aren't prepared to risk their subscriber base and say it.
It's one of the reasons I don't do reviews.
Yeah,
I'll do a review on another show where it's just off the cuff, but I don't put the because you can't win. You can't win. Look, to show you to case what you're talking about, the New York Times review of Candyman's headline is Candyman. See it, see it, see it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of enthusiasm for a B movie, and let's not pretend it's not. It's a B movie. Come on. You can't see that there's more being discussed than simply the film there, and that's not right or fair. Art should exist into itself. The moment you start bringing other issues into art as a reason to say it's good or bad, you're not doing your job, and you're not helping the people reading the reviews to make an informed decision either, because your biases are showing. Listen, when I do see it, if somehow it overcomes its screenplay, or it's the treatment and the screenplay, then I'll be the first to say, hey, you know what, guys, I was wrong. It's a great film. But my antenna are up in all the wrong ways. Same thing with Halloween Kills. I can't pretend. I just can't pretend. I don't want anyone ever to think, hey, he's just saying what everyone else wants to say. Because the easy thing to do would be like, it was awesome. And just go on with your life.
Yeah, Dan says several larger sites and YouTubers have to give favourable reviews to certain films. I can totally see that. I can totally see that. I just, I, I think any YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of subscribers or millions of subscribers, even, I think you've really got to take it with a pinch of salt what they're saying, because I don't want to generalize about anyone, but I think you've got to look at, have they got an agenda? I don't know.
You know what? Everyone has an agenda. Everyone has a point of view.
Yeah.
And art is the right place to express them. What I'm not liking is the fact that at this point, subtlety, good writing, and marketing a film as entertainment rather than as a cultural movement, which is a ridiculous concept. We're just in a wrong headspace right now. You know what? Black Christmas remake, right? There's nothing wrong, per se, about the message they wanted to project. I don't even disagree with it. I happen to be kind of like... I'm more liberally minded than people think I am. I just value freedom and honesty above any messaging. And the truth is, if they'd written a good film, if they had prioritized the right things, why not? But that's not where we're at as in our society. We make films that feel like screeds, and people who feel like, well, I believe that, so I better defend this. That's the wrong mindset. On the other hand, the people who attack too hard drive me nuts too. I mean, sometimes you gotta back off the ledge and just say, yeah, it didn't really work for me, but it wasn't the worst thing. It didn't offend you. It didn't destroy your childhood. I mean, I don't know. Again, it's sometimes things are in the middle, and we as a society, we don't do middle anymore.
I think with something like Black Christmas, the remake, and just in general, it's like it was the idea. It was preaching to like men as if we were all, misogynistic, scumbags, and the vast majority of men aren't like that. You're talking about a tiny minority, but you're trying to generalize that the majority of men are like that, and I'm not like that. And most men I know aren't like that. And you're selling a film to me and a lot of other men. Let's face it, the vast majority of the people who go and watch a film like that are going to be men. So it just seems like shoot yourself in the foot to try and portray that message. I mean, I'm not saying, obviously, there are a lot of douchebag, dickhead men, but that's still a minority to what most men are like. And when you're trying to, portray that message, and when the majority of the people go to see the film are going to be men, they're going to feel like, what's going on? That's
right. Well, the problem is it comes down to good and bad writing. That's what it really comes down to. Because, so if you look back, a film like Psycho, right? Psycho has a pretty biblically conservative viewpoint of the world. If you're a woman who's having an affair with a married man and you steal money from your job and go on the lam, you're going to end up sliced up in a hotel room by a man with mommy issues. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that how we feel about Psycho, though? No. Because all the characters are treated with respect for the world and the situation they're in. Marion, or Mary, depending if you're looking at the novel or the movie, is portrayed as a flawed human being, but a good human being. Right? We don't tar and feather Mary or Marion because of what she's done or the flaws in her life. That's good writing. But it has a point of view. It is definitely suggesting a certain social viewpoint, which I don't think anyone born in that century would have espoused the way that, well, actually, Bloch might have just been born in the century, but Hitchcock wasn't. So I think it's tragic that we can't write something like Black Christmas as a good as a good, solid film. What I don't like is when you tear down characters of a group in order to elevate other characters of a different group. That's not good writing. What is Rocky, right? The original film, not the franchise. What's so great about Rocky is that Rocky is flawed. He's driven, but he's a flawed man. He's not even going to win at the end of that movie. The point is that he makes a personal triumph that proves that he can succeed. Not that he does. That kind of depth is something we're sorely missing in modern writing for film. And Jamie's right. Everything Jamie just wrote right there is correct. I'm concerned about the health of the art. And bad writing on top of bad writing, it's not really just, okay, well, you don't have to watch it if you don't like it. It's if all we're getting primarily is bad writing, then I start to turn away from I have pretty much turned away from new American horror films. The majority of what I love is either foreign or old. I hate that. So I'm more worried about the health of the art. It's not a matter of whether I have to watch it or not.
Those. I'm starting to echo now. I don't know why. At the very end. Yeah, I'll just wrap things up now then, Lorne. Thanks for jumping on, man.
Yep.
Thanks for everyone in the chat. I will see you on Monday night, I think. His Patreon stream. Is it Monday?
It is Monday, yes. I hope so.
You doing your community stream Tuesday?
We are doing the community stream on Tuesday.
Well, if you be
busy week.
Yeah, if you'll have me on there, I'll see you on there as well. I'll get in early. If you.
Yeah, I've just gotten a lot of messages about it.
Okay,
so.
well, if everyone's got in messages early, I'll step out.
No. Whoever hits the link first and follows the rules gets in. I'm a simple man.
Okay.
I don't play favorites.
Anyway, thanks guys. Everyone in the chat, thank you, Lorne, for jumping on. We'll see you later.
Yep.
Bye guys.
Bye.
See ya.